So because it's technically its own agency. Yeah. So it's good. It's good to see how all this stuff gets moved around. So Congress and the president. Let's look at some of this legislative history here. And again, it's going to be good to kind of fill in the blank. So when something like this, what I would recommend is maybe like a quick bullet, try to define this in itself. So like Computer Security Act, what does it do? 10 words or less. Paperwork Reduction Act, revised, you should be able to write down 10 words, 10, 20 words in your own language. Don't recite the federal stuff, but in your own word, what does it mean to you? Because you can see how this has evolved since the 80s, everything from the Paperwork Reduction Act, then notice what's significant since basically 2001. What was the trend been? On the right.
More information.
Its guideline is standard oriented after 2001. Prior to that, a lot of this is either regulated, Office of Management and Budget. So basically, the president said, hey, we're going to do this, and you just did it. He didn't necessarily go over to NIST and say, hey, can you help us develop a standard based off of a guideline? So there wasn't that interagency communication. After that, the standard, if everybody follows the standard, then in theory, then we'll all be able to operate on the same deck of cards, if you will. So since 2001, everything's NIST. And if things keep going in the direction of NIST, good news for you guys is that once you know a handful of those NIST documents intimately, I think your life will get a lot easier. So you want to move mountains into workplace, you're going to have to direct people back to the NIST documents and understand them and be able to articulate your points and say, look, this is why we have to do it. This is a standard based off of a guideline, and we're doing this because, and then go to the authority paragraph that you have to do this, right? We have to be in compliance with this stuff. We don't have a choice. And NIST will communicate these through the SPs or special publications, and they're all 800 dash a number, and that number is a sequential order in which they're developed. So the latest would have the highest number, the oldest has the lowest number. There's a Klinger-Cohen Act, how it interfaces, and so you talk about acquisition. They have the Information Technology Reform Act that feeds into Klinger-Cohen, Federal Acquisition Reform Act that feeds into Klinger-Cohen, and then in theory would have improved acquisition and management, better compliance on the standard. Notice this information here, right? FIPS, Federal Information Processing Standard. And then the special publication would be the guidance for that standard. So when you see FIPS, these are two important things to recognize here. FIPS means standard, SP means guideline. So normally you just see FIPS 200 and SP 800-60, and you think, okay, wow, that's a whole bunch of numbers. But now you need to be able to break them down into two major buckets. One's standards, one's guidelines. Agree or disagree? Right? Does that help? Being able to look at it from this interagency?
Yeah, well, no, I wasn't just disputing that this sets the standard. It's just how to get there. It just seems like.
Yeah, they got their own developers / researchers / whiz kids that come up with this stuff based off of what the industry is doing, because one of the earlier documents is that, hey, that we recognize, the federal government recognizes that the private sector is a little bit ahead. You got companies like Cisco and Terasys, and I don't know, pick the company name, right? They are naturally ahead of the curve, and the government's typically behind. Oh, there's probably some notes here. All right, so you got business reference model. This looks at the lines of business, if you will. So, for example, every agency provides IT training and awareness programs that have the same general requirements, yet they have implemented them differently according to the culture and the politics of the individual agency. Would you agree or disagree with that? Yeah, so now here's kind of a big picture, maybe a little insight into your future. If things go the way of NIST, as the trend has been, things will get easier. If you follow the NIST roadmap, basically your life will get easier, but that's the direction that we're going in. So knowing those documents are only going to help you. Being able to speak intelligently to the contents of those documents, that will give you, that's like the leverage pole that you need to basically move the rock, if you will. Right. Yeah, so we're going to get into FIPS 99 and all that other stuff here in a little bit. All right. So government-wide initiatives, the PMA, President's Management Agenda. This is strategic management of human capital, competitive sourcing of information, improved financial performance in theory. Well, all right, I'll just leave it at that. And then you have your e-Government Act, right? So this is basically FSMA here. And specifically, we looked at FSMA Title III. What does FSMA Title III? What are the three major components of FSMA?
CIA?
Yes. Speaks to confidentiality, integrity, and availability, and the heads of the departments are the ones that really are the ones that have to go sit in front of Congress if things don't go right. All right. All right, so establish the Office of E-Government within the Office of Management and Budget. Areas, capital planning and investment. So what's capital planning? Well, big fancy words, so let's put them in human words.
Money. Budget.
Okay. Money and budget. Investment control. Develop enterprise architectures, and of course the Title III. Establishes a CIO council in the executive branch. So all the CIOs of each agency basically communicate with the president. That's the top-down model, if you will. Which is interesting because we have a bottom-up model. Our country was founded on a bottom-up model, meaning the people are, go back to the Constitution, we the people, they're at the top, then it's Congress, and then it's the president. This illustrates something different. This illustrates the president, then Congress, and then people are somewhere else in there. So you wonder why people have been upset lately. The model has been changed in the way that it processes information. It starts at the top, executive branch, and that communicates to all the agencies in a hierarchical fashion. That's the way the communication is governed now with the CIO council. All right, so Title III, every federal agency to implement an information security program. The adequacy of the program, deficiencies must be addressed. And again, it's continuously evolving, so that basically means begins with an L.
I'm sorry?
Continuously evolving is another name for life cycle. Exactly. Continually monitoring. Process is designed to shift our efforts away from the culture of paperwork and reports. Must focus on implementing solutions that actually work. So don't just red tape and push paperwork anymore. Let's actually try to improve this. Timely and role-relevant information. Go back to CNSS, where we define the roles. And then you go back to NIST, and you say, okay, what's the standard? Let's tie that to the role. Yeah, monthly data feeds. Anybody have to do monthly? You guys do the monthly reports? Any physical compliance monthly reports? Did you ever do those? No, I've done them in the past. Yeah, well, I'm the security guys though. Yeah, so those reports basically fed information, and a lot of that stuff is approached to pushing paper around. In other words, we would be at Centers for Medicaid and Medicare, and we come up with all of our statistics, and we basically have to feed that all the way up to the head of the parent agency, and not that they knew what we were providing them, and granted, we provided them numbers and what we thought was accurate information, but as it goes down the line, somebody else eventually just gets into an accounting method where all the statistics are counted. They're not necessarily judging what you're submitting to them. They're just basically combining and aggregating that report for the sake of reporting to the CIO council, if you will. Government-wide benchmarking on security posture, right? Questionnaires, and then you got cyber stat, which is basically interviews. All right, so continuous monitoring. Chief information officers, chief information security officers, and other agency management all need to have different levels of this information presented to them that enable them to make timely decision making. So what I can tell you from my role at Centers for Medicaid Medicare, we did all the granular statistics, but we basically aggregated all of that up to the top in terms of report so that decisions could be made. The problem that I found is that, great, we put all this information in front of people. I don't know if you know that. They have a different role and responsibility and focus. So I'm basically handing them oranges, and they don't know how to interpret oranges. They focus on apples. So they just put the oranges in the orange pile and go back to their counting of the apples. Right? Isn't that what happens in a lot of cases? You apparently agree with that, though, so why? Anything specific?
No, I mean, it doesn't make any sense.
No, right, exactly. So the data feeds that, and the road to hell is paved in golden intentions or something like that. In theory it sounds great, but what the practice of it as it goes from person to person to person, it's kind of like that stadium game, right? Where one person says a message and they go all the way around the stadium. By the time it comes back to them, it's nothing to do with the message that they started, right? It's minor interpretations of that.
Down the lane.
They put on their own spin. Everyone puts on their own spin.
Yeah, exactly. All of that happens. So specifically, inventory, hardware, software, training, that stuff's the specific point. The Inspector Generals assisted the task force in a parallel effort. This is your world here. To focus on the agency's management performance. So here's some of the things in the reporting: certification and accreditation, which would be the focus here, but it could be configuration management, incident management, training, remote access, monitoring, contractor oversight, are your contractors doing what they're supposed to be doing or not. So that can vary in itself. Nothing specifically practice test question oriented here. Privacy reporting. Who does that fall under? Where's the accountability here?
CIO, I would imagine.
Senior agency officials. Yeah. And you'll see that these are mostly memorandum updated or oriented. If you look specifically. Then you got NIST. Let's look at the NIST. All right. Well, actually, before we do this, let's take a quick break here. Agree?
Yeah.
Quick break.